got a bidet! Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video I want to talk about a Star Wars book I actually read through quite recently. Not your typical novel or chapter book, so to speak, but it is very, very interesting, and I think it's one that's worth at least taking a look at. And that is Star Wars: The Secrets of the Bounty Hunter. We're not going to do a read-along per se of this book, but I do want to talk about some cool things about it. What does it feature? What does it talk about? Also, some things that I actually didn't like about the book, which is purely like structure stuff. There's a couple of things that they did with the way that they present stuff in the book that is kind of irking to me, especially for someone that likes to collect these books. So let's dive right in. Let's start talking about the book and yeah, see if it's for you. Alright, so first things first. Who is this book for? Well, in my opinion, because you can just kind of see, I'll show you some of the artwork. Clearly this book has pictures in it and whatnot. So it is, I would consider it being a picture book. A lot of people may think that picture books mean that they're for kids or children. Well, I would highly disagree with this book in particular, simply because the content is pretty dense in this book. As far as, it's not like just rereading what happened from the movies or from the TV shows. There's a lot of good material in here that, the average Star Wars watcher or fan may not even know. Personally, I try to read, a good handful of Star Wars books, but I can't read all of them, of course. At least, I don't think I can. But this book does cover quite a bit of stuff, not only from the films, but it does cover stuff from the books, the comics, the video games, which is something very interesting that I thought was in here, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So I would say this book is for anybody. Really, I think kids would probably really enjoy just seeing all the different pictures of the bounty hunters, their ships, their weapons and stuff, being able to point out, their favorite characters in the book and the stuff that they use. The pictures are phenomenal in this book. It's not just, someone did a drawing in 10 minutes. I'm sure these pictures, they have some really, really nice detail to them. Let's see, what else? The reading itself, just because, some of the names are a little challenging, that's another reason why I wouldn't say it's just a kid's book. There are some things in here that are a little bit harder to either pronounce or just read in general. So I would say this is probably around teenager to adult, in my opinion. Like I said, it's very enjoyable. I enjoyed it quite a bit as an adult. I did not feel like this was a children's version of Star Wars by any means. And so, as far as who is this for, the casual fan or people that are genuinely interested in learning more about the bounty hunters, because that's what this book is all about. So yeah, that's who this book is for. Let's talk about the structure of the book before we actually get into the content. So this book is not the only book like this. We talked about, I think it was a Sith version of this book in the past on the channel. We still have the Jedi one that we need to take a look at. But as far as the structure, it's not just, flipping through and seeing, different pictures and whatnot. There's actually different things that are cool little artifact, quote unquote, type things. The book is told from the point of view of Hondo, so if you haven't seen the shows or gone on the rides at Disney, Hondo right here is the narrator, and basically he is somebody that is in contact with all these bounty hunters, and is able to share his expertise. It is very much written with the way that he talks from the show, so if you're just reading this book in his voice the entire time, that's probably the best experience, especially for the little quirky things that he says throughout as well. Some other things to point out. Right here you can see that there is a flap, and inside here, you can pull out what is in there to take a further look. This is actually one of my small gripes about the book. Inside there was this paper, and you can see it is a wanted poster for Hondo. But the reason why it's one of my gripes is because this thing is, it's got to be able to hold that paper in there, so it's very, very tight. So I can see it being fairly fragile in the long run. Some other examples of things. Here we have Hondo's guild member identification card. There's also, so like for this section where it talks about Din Djarin, there are parts where you can open the page up even further and see more stuff. So we got that. We got, this one's pretty cool. Kind of shows you this dude, and then it shows you underneath, what that guy was before. Again, you can read more about it in the book to find out what that's about, but it's cool just that they show some like before and after things with some of the characters. There's a pamphlet of Cad Bane's crew, like almost like a brochure, which is kind of hilarious. I did enjoy that. That was cool. Probably one of my favorite things. Again, one of the gripes, it's kind of hard to keep this super, super nice. Like, you can't flip fast through it, just because some of this stuff may get out of control. Here's probably my favorite one. It shows the changing of Zam Wesell, because she was a changeling. You can flip that flap down and up to see her change between her two looks. But yeah, ultimately that's the structure of the book. There's like different sections of different characters. There's tons of bounty hunters that are covered in this book, which gives it a nice amount of substance, so that's super cool. And like I said, they're not just telling you the things from the films, they're telling you things from the books that are cool things to learn about. So now that we've talked about the structure of the book, let's talk a little bit about who's in this book, and what are some of the cool things. I don't want to spoil everything, but what are some of the cool things that they do and talk about? Okay, so they start off with a general idea of what a bounty hunter is, and that there's pirates, there's mercenaries, and a bounty hunter is kind of like the mix between the two. Obviously, all the bounty hunters have their own things that they do, but generally that's kind of what they are. They're people that are hired to gather either a person or a thing. If it's a person, they could be dead or alive, a wide variety of things, but ultimately they're there for the money. They're not there for personal issues, so to speak. The first person that they talk about is Bulba, and one of the cool things about it is that this book goes through the book of Boba Fett. So the only thing that I really haven't seen in here is Andor content, just because that show is very, very new. But the content that they talk about does go all the way through the book of Boba Fett for not just Boba's character, but for many others as well. They do talk about his early years, the fact that he got out of the Sarlacc, in the book of Boba Fett show. They talk about his ship, his dad, all that good stuff, who he was associated with, because, he did bounties for a lot of different people, but probably the most common are Jabba and Vader. So they do touch on that quite a bit. We do talk about Din Djarin in the book. I would say a lot of the content in Mando's portion of the book is from the show. I feel like there wasn't a whole lot there that really added to his character. But I will say the first couple of bounty hunters that are covered, um, the majority of the information you may know just from casually watching the show, it's the second half of the book that really, really gets interesting. We also talk about IG series droids. So IG-88 is from the original trilogy. You can see him in Empire Strikes Back very briefly when Vader is trying to gather up people to go and capture Han Solo, the Millennium Falcon. We also got IG-11, which we saw in The Mandalorian. And we also, on that section of the book, get to see a bunch of the weapons that the different bounty hunters have used. Some of the cool stuff here, it talks about how IG-88 in particular, so from the original trilogy, tried to betray Vader at one point and then was destroyed, and then somebody rebuilt him. And they talk about same thing with IG-11, kind of how Mando shot out his brains, and then Quill rebuilt him as basically a babysitter. Moving along, this is where we start to talk about the people that aren't as common with the movies and shows, and we start talking about 4-LOM and Zuckuss and how they work together a lot. I did not know that 4-LOM was a protocol droid. Now that I have heard that, I can look at the character and understand where that's coming from. But it was really cool to learn about that in particular. I did not know that he was partner in crime with Zuckuss. I learned a little bit more about that character as well and some of their endeavors. Let's see. Again, don't want to spoil too much. Somebody I had no idea who he was Beilert Valance, I think is his name. Hopefully I am pronouncing that right, or Valance. Basically, there was a dude that was like blown to bits, and then they restructured his body into an android. So it's very much like Vader in a way, and General Grievous. But I did not know that he had some run-ins with Han Solo. Like he was friends with Han Solo when they were both working for the Empire. So kind of cool to hear about that. Talk about Dengar a little bit. He is also seen in Empire Strikes Back very briefly. We talk about Bossk, and one of the things that I did not know about Bossk that was really cool in here is it says that when Bossk was born, I guess there was a couple of other siblings that were born with him, and apparently he ate his siblings. He was like the last one, a part of his group. Let's see. Where was that? Yeah, it says, if the rumors are true, Bossk must have been horrified to discover that his sister, and then this name, the only sibling he failed to devour in the nest as a hatchling. So, he ate his siblings. That's terrifying. We talk about Boushh a little bit, or Boushh, whatever you want to say. So, we see the armor of this character in Return of the Jedi, because Leia comes into possession of it, and then she impersonates a bounty hunter when bringing Chewbacca to Jabba the Hutt. But you actually get to deep dive a little bit more into the actual Boushh or Boushh, whatever you want to call that character. Cad Bane is talked about quite a bit. I do feel like a lot of his information was gathered from the shows. One interesting thing is that it kind of hints that in the book of Boba Fett that he may not be dead at the end of that show. So we'll have to wait and see, did he survive or did he not? But I thought it was interesting that they kind of left it open-ended in this book. They did not just flat out declare him dead. Embo is another one. I feel like I've seen this dude before. It's a bounty hunter that has a hat that they also use for a shield, or the example they talked about was that he used it for a sled down a snow mountain. Sugi or Shugi, I don't know how to pronounce that name. It's a bounty hunter that was a partner of Embo's. And then Serapas is another one, which is like a little gremlin that's in a armor, like a suit of armor, so to speak, controlling like a a mech. Chrysanthemum is the character from Book of Boba Fett, the Wookiee. Some interesting stuff in here is that it does talk about how he got his scar on his eye from a Jedi on Tatooine, which in the book they definitely show a picture of Obi-Wan fighting Chrysanthemum. But kind of cool that they actually talk about that scar in here. We got Deva Lompop, which was one of Jabba the Hutt's favorite bounty hunters, almost in a affectionate way as well, even though she did not reciprocate those feelings. So it's kind of cool to learn about her. Also in that section they talk about the different ships that the bounty hunters have, so it's cool to see not only the ones that I recognize, but also the ones of the different bounty hunters that I wasn't aware of. Dirge is an interesting one that they talk about in here, simply because it kind of talks about that he's a legend, and I kind of got the vibe that maybe they're talking about because he's from Star Wars Legends. But his armor does reappear in, I believe, a comic book of Star Wars, and Hondo is kind of telling the reader that, you know, the actual bounty hunter may be a legend, but the armor is definitely a thing. So there's really no clear-cut information on Dirge, unfortunately. I was looking forward to Dirge because this is a character from Star Wars, the Clone Wars, like the original Clone Wars, not just the one we're used to on Disney Plus. The 2D animation, Dirge was a big character for that. We talked about the Haxion Brood. I didn't know much about them. Basically people that are very much mech people, kind of like Valance. Imara Vex. This one was interesting. So the picture for Imara Vex, I'll go ahead and show you. I had thought that these people looked a little familiar. I couldn't quite place it until I looked at, this was one of my pet peeves. They put things over text that is attached to the book, and I really don't want to rip that out of the book. So that's not the only spot either, so it kind of upset me. But back to the characters. This is from the video game that's supposed to be coming out sometime soon for Nintendo Switch and mobile, I believe, for Star Wars Hunters. And the characters that are in the pictures are from that video game, so it was cool that they made a connection to the video game. I was not expecting that, especially since the game isn't out yet here in the United States. So I thought that was interesting. There is a section on bounty hunters that have died. So they talked about Aurra Sing, Greedo, and Zam. They do not confirm that Han shot first, but only that Greedo was too slow. So I don't know really how you want to paint that, but Disney is not saying that Han shot first, nor denying it in that case. Zam Wesell, most of that was from Attack of the Clones. They also talk about, lastly, about different crime syndicates that these bounty hunters work for. So the Hutt Cartel, so the Hutts that we see in Book of Boba, Jabba the Hutt, all those people. Black Sun, some of you may not be as familiar with the Black Sun, but they were part of Empire Strikes Back, Shadows of the Empire, which was a video game for Nintendo 64. It's touched that those people are touched on here. They were in the shows a little bit too, not much, but a little bit. Pike Syndicate, so we saw them in Book of Boba Fett. Really, the content here is Book of Boba Fett content. Crimson Dawn, so the group that was from Solo, so they touch on that. And then lastly, the Empire. So they talk about, the Empire needing to use bounty hunters for different things. This is another example of how there's something attached that covers text. It's really hard to even see. I'm not even pulling it up high enough for you to see. But if you want to keep your stuff in really good condition, it's hard to be able to read it all. So that bothers me. And then the last page of the book is just a conclusion of Hondo wrapping things up and, sending the reader off and, feeling good about bounty hunter stuff. But that's ultimately what the book is about and what is in it. Again, I'm not going to spoil every cool thing that was in this book because I recommend you checking it out. But it's definitely worth it. I don't remember what we paid for it, but I know I got it on a buy two get one deal at Target. So look out for those. We covered the one that's about the Sith already on the channel. We will be having one coming out about the Jedi sometime in the future, so make sure to look forward to that. If you have any questions about the book, feel free to let me know in the comments, but that is going to wrap up this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing to the channel and dropping us a like if you liked it. Please drop us a comment letting us know your thoughts on the book. Have you read it? Would you recommend it to people? Did you like the other ones that are in this series as well? I really hope they continue to do more stuff like this, like maybe one on Scoundrels. Maybe I think it'd be cool just to do one like on the Empire and the Rebels. I know they talked about the dark side, like the Sith and the Jedi in previous books, but it would be cool to learn more about even just the Empire and the Rebels. So let us know what your thoughts are in the comments, and then as always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.